The morning sun glinted off the pristine turquoise water of Marcus Haywood's backyard pool, casting dancing reflections across the recently renovated patio. At 52, Marcus had finally created the backyard sanctuary he'd always wanted, a luxury he rewarded himself with after 23 years of teaching high school physics. The kidney-shaped pool with its elegant waterfall feature and the surrounding garden beds of drought-resistant natives had cost him a small fortune, but every cent had been worth it. Until Karen Wilcox moved in next door. Marcus was draining the coffee grounds from his French press when the doorbell rang. He glanced at the kitchen clock, 8:17 a.m. on a Saturday, too early for casual visitors. Through the frosted glass of his front door, he could make out a feminine silhouette, one hand on her hip, the other clutching what looked like a stack of papers. "Coming," he called, wiping his hands on a dish towel. When he opened the door, Karen's face brightened with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was dressed in a white linen sundress and oversized sunglasses pushed up on her head, looking like she'd stepped out of a country club brochure. "Good morning, neighbor." Her voice carried the artificial cheerfulness of a telemarketing call. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Morning, Karen." Marcus didn't bother matching her enthusiasm. In the 6 weeks since she'd moved in, their interactions had been limited to her complaints about his wind chimes, his garbage bins being visible from her kitchen window, and the excessive noise of his pool filter. "I got the most wonderful news," she continued, thrusting the stack of papers toward him. "I'm hosting the Neighborhood Association's summer kickoff party next weekend. It's going to be fabulous. Catered food, signature cocktails, even a live jazz trio." Marcus took the papers reluctantly. It was an invitation, garishly decorated with clip art of beach balls and martini glasses. "That sounds nice." He started to hand it back. "But I usually visit my sister in." "Oh, you don't have to come," Karen interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Actually, what I wanted to discuss is a tiny favor." Something in her tone made Marcus's stomach tighten. You already knew he wouldn't like what came next. "You see," Karen continued, her manicured fingernail tapping the invitation, "my backyard is perfect for entertaining, but it's missing one crucial element for a proper summer party." She paused dramatically. "A pool." The silence stretched between them as Marcus processed her implication. "You want to use my pool? For your party?" "It makes perfect sense." Karen clapped her hands together. "Your backyard connects to mine through that little gate in the hedge. We could just open it up and voila, one spectacular party space. I've already told everyone about the amazing pool." Marcus stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Karen, I'm sorry, but no. My pool isn't a public amenity." Her smile faltered but quickly repositioned itself. "I understand your hesitation, but I've thought of everything. I'll have everyone sign liability waivers and I'll pay for a professional cleaning afterward. It's not about liability or cleaning. It's my private property." Karen's expression hardened. "The Neighborhood Association has no jurisdiction over my backyard." Marcus finished firmly. "I'm not part of your HOA. I opted out when I bought this house 15 years ago, remember?" "But this is a community event," she pressed. "Everyone's contributing something. The Millers are bringing their cornhole set, the Pattles are handling dessert." "And I wish you all a wonderful time," Marcus said, taking a step back into his house. "But my contribution won't be my pool." Karen's pleasant facade cracked, revealing the steel beneath. "I've already sent out 60 invitations, Marcus. People are expecting a pool party." "That sounds like a planning issue on your end," he replied, his hand now on the door. "I never agreed to this." "We'll see about that," Karen hissed, her eyes narrowing. "You know there are bylaws about neighborhood cohesion and property values. I'm on the board now." As Marcus closed the door on her indignant face, he had the distinct feeling that this conversation was far from over. What he didn't realize was just how far Karen Wilcox was willing to go to get what she wanted, and how his quiet life was about to become anything but peaceful. The week following Karen's unannounced visit passed with surprising quietude. Marcus almost convinced himself that she had accepted his refusal and moved on to a more accommodating plan for her party. Almost. On Thursday afternoon, Marcus returned home from grocery shopping to find a team of workers in Karen's backyard. They were erecting a large white tent and stringing fairy lights between her pergola and the hedge that separated their properties. One man was measuring the width of the gate in the hedge, the same gate Karen had mentioned using to access his pool. Marcus set his groceries on the kitchen counter and marched outside. "Excuse me," he called to the worker with the measuring tape. "What are you doing with that gate?" The man looked up, startled. "Just checking measurements, sir. The client wants it widened for Saturday's event." "Widened?" Marcus felt heat rising to his face. "That gate isn't being widened. In fact, it's not being opened at all." The worker glanced uncomfortably toward Karen's house. "You might want to take that up with the homeowner. I'm just following instructions." As if summoned by the conversation, Karen appeared on her back patio, a clipboard in hand. She waved cheerfully at Marcus. "There you are. I was hoping to catch you." She strode across her lawn toward the hedge, her high heels sinking slightly into the manicured grass. "What do you think? It's coming together beautifully, isn't it?" Marcus crossed his arms. "Karen, why are your workers measuring my gate?" "Oh, that," she waved dismissively. "We need to make sure we can fit the bar cart through." "Nothing to worry about." "There is no we here," Marcus said firmly. "And nothing is coming through that gate. I thought I made myself clear on Saturday. My pool is not available for your party." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Marcus, I think you're being unnecessarily difficult. I've spoken with several other neighbors about this, and everyone agrees that sharing amenities for community events is what good neighbors do." "I'm sure they'd agree, especially when they're not the ones being volunteered," Marcus replied dryly. "The answer is still no. I already hired lifeguards," Karen pressed, "2 certified professionals. They'll be responsible for everyone's safety." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. "You hired lifeguards for a pool you don't have permission to use? Karen, this has gone from presumptuous to delusional." For a moment, Karen's carefully crafted facade slipped, and Marcus glimpsed raw anger in her expression before she composed herself. "You know, Marcus," she said, her voice honey but with an unmistakable edge, "I received some interesting information from the city planning office yesterday. It seems your pool might not be up to current code. Something about the fence height and self-closing gate mechanisms." Marcus stiffened. His pool had been built before the updated regulations, but had been grandfathered in during the last inspection. He wasn't in violation of anything, but fighting a code complaint, even a baseless one, would be a headache he didn't need. "Are you threatening me?" he asked quietly. Karen tilted her head innocently. "Threatening? Goodness, no. I'm simply concerned about safety. As HOA board secretary, it's my responsibility to ensure all properties in our neighborhood are compliant. I've already told you I'm not part of your HOA." "Technically, no," she conceded with a thin smile. "But the city code applies to everyone, HOA member or not. And you'd be surprised how responsive they can be when the complaint comes from a neighborhood association board member." Before Marcus could respond, his phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, relieved for the interruption when he saw his sister's name on the screen. "I need to take this," he said, turning away. "But to be absolutely clear, my pool is off limits. If I see anyone from your party on my property, I'll consider it trespassing." As he walked back toward his house, he heard Karen call after him. "This isn't over, Marcus. You're making a big mistake." Inside, he answered his sister's call while watching through the window as Karen gestured animatedly to her event staff, occasionally pointing toward his yard with sharp, aggressive movements. "Hey, Guyan," he sighed into the phone. "You're not going to believe what's happening over here." After explaining the situation to his sister, she let out a low whistle. "Sounds like you got yourself a classic entitled neighbor. What are you going to do?" Marcus rubbed his forehead, feeling a headache forming. "I don't know. Part of me wants to just go away for the weekend to avoid the drama, and I'll be damned if I let her bully me out of my own home." "You know what Dad would say," Diane reminded him. "Never let him take your ground." Saturday arrived with perfect pool party weather, cloudless skies, gentle breezes, and temperatures climbing into the mid-80s by noon. Marcus observed the activity next door with growing unease as catering vans and rental trucks lined the street. Workers streamed in and out of Karen's house carrying trays of food, coolers of drinks, and stacks of folding chairs. After his morning coffee, Marcus methodically went through his preparations. He checked the new lock on the gate, secure. He verified that his security cameras were functioning properly, all 4 recording. He placed printed copies of his property survey and deed, highlighting the explicit boundary lines in a folder on his kitchen counter. Finally, he texted his neighbor on the other side, Jim Peterson, a retired police officer who had become a good friend over the years. "Heads up about the situation with Karen. If you hear a commotion later, that's probably why." Jim's response came quickly. "Got your back. Want me to come over?" Marcus considered the offer. "Not yet, hoping it won't come to that. But stay on standby?" "Roger that. I'll keep my phone handy." By 2 o'clock, guests began arriving at Karen's. From his kitchen window, Marcus could see elegantly dressed people mingling on her patio, champagne flutes in hand. A 3-piece jazz band had set up under the white tent, their mellow tunes drifting over the hedge. Under different circumstances, it might have been pleasant background music for a lazy Saturday afternoon. At 3:30, Marcus's doorbell rang. He'd been expecting this moment, but his stomach still tightened as he approached the door. Through the peephole, he saw Karen flanked by a tall, sun-tanned man in an expensive-looking polo shirt and boat shoes. Marcus opened the door but remained firmly in the doorway, blocking entry. "Hello, Karen." "Marcus, the party is in full swing and everyone's having a marvelous time." Her voice was bright, but her eyes were calculating. "This is Gregory Phillips, our HOA president." The man extended his hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Marcus. Karen has told me so much about you." Marcus did not take the offered hand. "I'm sure she has." Gregory's smile dimmed slightly, but he pressed on. "Look, I understand there's been some miscommunication about the pool situation. As association president, I'm hoping we can reach a reasonable compromise." "There's been no miscommunication," Marcus replied evenly. "I've been perfectly clear that my pool is not available for Karen's party. Not today, not ever." Karen's smile tightened. "Marcus, you're being ridiculous. We have over 40 guests back there expecting a pool party. I've told them all about your beautiful backyard." "That's not my problem," Marcus said. "You shouldn't have promised something that wasn't yours to offer." Gregory stepped forward, adopting what Marcus assumed was his boardroom negotiation posture. "Perhaps we could discuss compensation. The association would be willing to cover any reasonable costs, cleaning, chemicals, even a weekend getaway for you while we use the space." Marcus shook his head. "This isn't about money. It's about respecting private property and personal boundaries, concepts Karen seems to struggle with." Karen's facade finally cracked. "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You're not a team player. Everyone else in this neighborhood understands community spirit. Everyone except you. If community spirit means letting you commandeer my property because you failed to plan your own event properly, then you're right. I don't have it." Gregory placed a restraining hand on Karen's arm as she opened her mouth to retort. "Perhaps we're approaching this the wrong way," he said smoothly. "Marcus, would you be willing to at least show us the pool area? Once you see how responsibly we've arranged everything, you might feel differently." Marcus almost laughed. "So you can get a bunch of people into my backyard and create a situation where I'd have to physically remove them?" "No thanks." Karen's expression darkened. "We're trying to be reasonable here, but you're forcing our hand. Did you know that blocking access to shared neighborhood resources can be grounds for legal action?" "My pool is not a shared resource," Marcus stated firmly. "And before you make legal threats, you should know that I've consulted with an attorney about this situation." This wasn't strictly true, but his brother-in-law was a lawyer, and they had discussed the scenario in general terms. Gregory looked uncomfortable now. "Karen, perhaps we should." "No," she snapped, cutting him off. Her pleasant veneer had completely vanished. "I'd invested thousands in this party. Everyone is expecting a pool. I promised them a pool." "Then you shouldn't have promised something that wasn't yours," Marcus repeated. "This conversation is over." He began to close the door, but Karen slammed her palm against it, preventing him from shutting it completely. Sunday morning brought an eerie calm. Marcus woke early, half expecting to find his yard vandalized or his pool water dyed an unnatural color, but everything appeared untouched. The only evidence of yesterday's confrontation was a few plastic cups that had blown over the hedge from Karen's yard. He collected the trash while sipping his coffee, wondering if the worst had passed. By noon, Karen's rental company arrived to dismantle the tent and remove the tables and chairs. Marcus observed from his kitchen window as workers efficiently packed everything away. There was no sign of Karen herself. Monday arrived, and Marcus returned to his regular routine, teaching physics to restless high school students, counting down the days until summer vacation. When he returned home that afternoon, he discovered a certified letter in his mailbox. The return address belonged to the city's code enforcement department. With a sinking feeling, Marcus opened the envelope. Inside was an official notice of inspection scheduled for the following Monday, citing multiple reported violations of municipal pool safety ordinances. The complainant's name was redacted, but Marcus had no doubt who had filed it. He called the department immediately, speaking to a tired-sounding administrator who confirmed that yes, the inspection was mandatory, and no, it couldn't be rescheduled unless he had a documented emergency. "Can you at least tell me what specific violations were reported?" Marcus asked. "Let's see." He heard papers shuffling. Inadequate fence height, non-compliant gate closure mechanism, absence of required safety signage, improper chemical storage, and pool cover that doesn't meet current safety standards. Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "Most of those requirements weren't in place when my pool was built. I should be grandfathered in under the old code." "That may be true," the administrator acknowledged, "but once a formal complaint is filed, we're required to inspect. The inspector will take the age of the installation into account." After hanging up, Marcus called his brother-in-law, Michael, who practiced real estate law. "She's retaliating," Marcus explained after describing the situation. "Can she do this?" "Unfortunately, yes," Michael replied. "Anyone can file a complaint, and the city has to follow up. But here's the thing, if your pool passed inspection when it was built and you haven't made structural modifications since then, you're likely protected by a grandfather clause." "Likely. These things can get complicated. Do you have the original permits and inspection documentation?" Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. Somewhere. Probably it was 15 years ago. Find them, Michael advised, and take photos of everything now before the inspection. Document the current state of your pool area thoroughly. Marcus spent that evening digging through old files in his home office, eventually locating the yellowed folder containing his original pool permits and inspection certificates. He set his alarm an hour early for the next morning, planning to photograph and measure every aspect of his pool setup before heading to school. But when his alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., he was awakened not by its beeping but by the sound of running water. Lots of it, coming from his backyard. Marcus rushed to his bedroom window and peered out into the pre-dawn darkness. What he saw made his blood run cold. Water was gushing over the sides of his pool, cascading down into the yard like a miniature Niagara Falls. The pool was overflowing at an alarming rate. He bolted downstairs and out the back door, barefoot and still in his pajamas. In the dim glow of his patio lights, he could see that someone had dragged a garden hose into his pool and turned it on full blast. The water level was already several inches above normal, flooding his carefully maintained landscaping and creating a small lake that was rapidly spreading toward his home's foundation. Marcus yanked the hose out and shut off the water, but the damage was already done. At least 1,000 gallons had overflowed, saturating the ground. As he stood there assessing the situation in disbelief, a flash of white caught his eye. There, pinned beneath a decorative rock by the pool's edge, was a sheet of paper. He picked it up, squinting to read it in the low light. "Hoops. Looks like a plumbing accident. Better get that fixed before your inspection." The note wasn't signed, but the handwriting matched the passive-aggressive note Karen had left in his mailbox the previous month about his wind chimes. Marcus's shock quickly gave way to cold anger. He went inside and called the police non-emergency line, reporting the vandalism and trespassing. Then he texted Jim, who appeared in his backyard 5 minutes later, still in his bathrobe. The week leading up to the rescheduled pool inspection was remarkably quiet. Too quiet in Marcus's estimation. Karen's house showed signs of life, lights turning on and off, her car coming and going. But the woman herself remained conspicuously absent from her yard, and the usual barrage of passive-aggressive texts and notes had ceased entirely. "She's planning something," Marcus told Jim over the fence on Friday evening. "This silence isn't surrender. It's tactical." Jim nodded grimly. "My wife heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Karen's still going ahead with that fundraiser at the community pool tomorrow, calling it Pool Safety Awareness Event now." Marcus had spent the week preparing for Monday's inspection with Michael's help. They found documentation confirming that his pool installation predated the current code requirements by 7 years, making him eligible for grandfather clause exceptions to most of the alleged violations. As for the safety signage and chemical storage issues, Marcus had promptly brought those into compliance, installing new warning signs and a lockable storage cabinet for his pool chemicals. By Sunday evening, Marcus felt reasonably confident about the next day's inspection. He'd even taken Jim's advice and installed 3 additional security cameras covering the pool area, with alerts set to notify his phone of any motion detection. At 11:45 p.m., just as Marcus was drifting off to sleep, his phone buzzed with an alert. Someone was in his backyard. He sat up, instantly alert, and opened the security app. The night vision camera showed a figure moving stealthily around his pool. Not Karen this time, but a man in dark clothing carrying what looked like measuring tools. As Marcus watched in disbelief, a man began carefully measuring the height of his pool fence, photographing it with a flash and making notes on a clipboard. Marcus immediately called 911, reporting a trespasser on his property. Then he pulled on sweatpants and quietly made his way downstairs, keeping the lights off. Through his kitchen window, he could see the man was now measuring the distance between his fence posts with a laser measuring device. The trespasser was so absorbed in his task that he didn't notice the police cruiser arriving with its lights off. Marcus met the officers, Sergeant Martinez among them, at his front door, quickly explaining the situation. They moved swiftly through his house and out the back door, catching the intruder completely by surprise. "Police, don't move." The man dropped his clipboard and raised his hands, looking panicked. After securing the scene and verifying the man wasn't armed, Sergeant Martinez asked, "Sir, what are you doing on this property at midnight?" "I'm just doing my job," the man protested. "I work for Precision Property Assessments. I was hired to document code violations." At midnight, without the homeowner's permission, the man shifted uncomfortably. "The client said it was urgent, that we needed measurements before a city inspection tomorrow. She said she had permission from the owner to access the property." "And who is this client?" Martins asked, though Marcus already knew the answer. "Karen Wilcox. She's the secretary of the neighborhood association. She gave me a key to the side gate." Martinez exchanged a glance with Marcus. "Sir, that key was obtained illegally. You're trespassing on private property. I need to see some identification." While the other officer escorted the man to the patrol car, Martinez examined the clipboard he dropped. It contained a detailed checklist of pool code requirements with specific instructions to document any violations photographically. This goes beyond harassment into criminal behavior, Martinez told Marcus quietly. Raking and entering, trespassing, falsely claiming to have your permission. We'll need a formal statement from you, but I think we have enough now to approach Ms. Wilcox tonight. Marcus hesitated. Tonight? If she provided this man with an illegally obtained key, she's orchestrated a criminal trespass. That's not something we typically wait until business hours to address. Martinez suggested Marcus remain at home while they handled the situation. From his front window, he watched as additional police cruisers arrived over the next hour. Lights blazed on in Karen's house, and neighbors' curtains twitched as the late-night police activity roused their curiosity. Just after 1:30 a.m., Marcus's phone rang. Michael, his brother-in-law. I just got a call from Sergeant Martinez, Michael said, sounding wide awake despite the hour. They're pressing charges against Karen for criminal trespass by proxy, harassment, and providing false information to a contractor. They wanted to know if you'd be willing to meet at the station tomorrow to provide a formal statement.